G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day and so far a great week, and I hope that your day is a little bit better than mine. I'm feeling absolutely horrible on my chemotherapy that I am taking at the moment. Now I just filmed this video, but the useless app that I used, it corrupted the file, so I'm restarting it. So legends, as always, of course, we have a lot to go over. We're going to look at the maps, we'll compare maps. I've got a number of geolocations to show you as well. Also a month wrap up for the month of March. I want to talk about US tariffs and how that may be backfiring. I want to look at what Trump has said about Zelensky. And of course, I want to look at then some changes made to Russian Garand drones, as we have seen an increase in hits very recently, and this could be the reason. Now, I just want to speak on my health for a little bit, as I said I would. Now, I hit a bit of a hurdle yesterday. After recording yesterday, I directly went and took my medication, and I immediately felt very unwell. As always, on the first day of chemotherapy, on the first dose, I have a pre-booked appointment with my oncologist. Whilst in the waiting room, I felt incredibly unwell and started vomiting. Now, the doctor saw me then shortly after this while I was still very unwell. Now, his advice, the oncologist's advice, was to skip this round because he's just not happy with how unwell I am getting. And in his words, he said, I can't keep torturing you like this. We have to take a pause and find out how can we improve it for you. Now, I'm a bit unsure on what to do. On one hand, I have the oncologist telling me to skip around and we'll pick up where we left off in a few weeks. We'll try and find something that works for me. And he said that realistically it won't make much of a difference, if any. But on the other hand, I have this feeling like I'm giving up on my treatment and in turn giving up on myself, my friends, my family, and you guys too, because there's very little options for treatment for what I have growing in my head. So I don't know what I'm going to do. I still have the rest of this week's medication sitting on my counter, and I'm yet to decide if I go against advice and press on or not. I just really don't know. I have an appointment with a psychologist who does some hypnotherapy to see if maybe we can build a separate association between my brain and the drug. I don't know. At this point, I'll try anything. So I don't know what's going to go ahead, but I may disappear for a few days. Now, we spoke about the two sort of sub-bits of the video we're going to be speaking about, but the main meat in this video is going to be talking about how the EU are becoming the very authoritarians that they claim to oppose and the very authoritarians that their fathers died resisting. So that is where we're going to start. Now, what am I talking about? Well, we have to talk about what has taken place in France. So we will start here, and that this is awfully convenient, all in the name of protecting democracy. So 4 days ago, top French court rules political bans are now legal. And today, we see that Le Pen is going to appeal an election ban because she has been banned from running in the next election after a case of embezzlement. So very convenient here, all happening apparently in the name of democracy. So let's talk about this more. That their legal evidence against her was said to be substantial. The court's ruling, though, will prove to be highly divisive because she, at the moment, is the frontrunner in many polls going against Emmanuel Macron in a few years, and this ban is 5 years, so runs, of course, over that. Now, there's been a hell of a lot of backlash. J.D. Vance, he's attacked then centrist European governments for running in fear of voters and suppressing democracy. Elon Musk has said when the radical left can't win via democratic vote, they abuse the legal system to jail their opponents. This is their standard playbook throughout the world. He added that this will backfire like the legal attacks against President Trump. Trump himself said the conviction and ban from running for office was a very big deal. That sounds like this country. That sounds very much like this country. As well, Viktor Orban, Hungary's leader, has jumped on board too. And remember, that they claim here as illiberal, but remember, it's only illiberalism if you are conservative. Doesn't matter what you do that is illiberal on the progressive side, they will never call you this. And a contact from France has said this, Matt, the funny thing about Marine Le Pen's conviction is now more people are flocking to her party and officially joining it than ever. I guess this is the extra bit of motivation they needed. And this is exactly how we saw Mr. Trump get into power. Was the more they resisted, the more they tried to do to stop him from running or kill him, then it has led to being overwhelmingly victorious. So we see that happening in France, one of Europe's most powerful nations. But it's not only there. It doesn't just end there. We saw earlier this week this happen in Estonia. Estonian MPs pass a bill to limit voting rights for a Russian minority. Of course, Estonia has been one of the biggest supporters of Kiev. We see that this is 93 voted to back this of the 101-seat chamber to impose these restrictions. The Prime Minister, he hailed the outcome as a victory for all, well, not 80,000, and the decisions in our local life won't be made by the citizens of aggressor states, but we'll decide by ourselves. Of course, there's no evidence that any decisions domestically have been changed by this. Nearly 80,000 Russian citizens hold a residence permit in the former Soviet Republic of 1.3 million people. And Estonia doesn't recognise dual citizenships. Also, these people, they don't qualify for citizenship because of a lack of blood ties to Estonia. And until this, that on that residence permit, they were able to vote. But they've changed this purely to target these people. Also, 60,000 people were left stateless after the fall of the Soviet Union, but due to these blood ties were not then grandfathered into citizenship. Now, from this person here, this Ran Tumler, apparently a political expert, he has said if Russians had been, from our point of view, sensible, no one would have limited this. Russian citizens living in Estonia have fallen victim to this because of Russia has acted this way, not them. So now we are putting group punishment onto a minority living in a country. Imagine if this was any other group of people that this was happening to. These people are unlucky that they are white and Russian, because otherwise there would be mass hysteria about this happening, but no one cares because of that. That it matters who it is and what they look like rather than what is actually happening here as far as this blatant discrimination of changing laws right here. Because, Mr. Tumler, you fuckwit, you have said that it isn't because they have acted in any way. Okay? Exactly like we see here, the decisions being made. No, they haven't acted in any way. But now it's group punishment because of maybe the blood running through your veins. This is fucking ridiculous, and this tells me the future of the EU, I have very, very large concerns. Now, this person here has said the country is divided. It's Estonians who are you and us Russians, who the Estonians don't trust. And this is the mayor of Narva, a predominantly Russian-speaking town. That citizenship or ethnicity doesn't make anyone a security threat, and that is then correct. It's not just who you are. You actually have to then partake in an action. Imagine if you tried to do this to any other group of people. Imagine if there was laws like this put into place when a country went to war in the Middle East somewhere or whatever. It is ridiculous. And many are saying that this discrimination of a minority, could this lead to Putin to liberate his people? Because they are being discriminated against in a country that doesn't then grant then citizenship, then won't then see to this also. Could this, and we've been very against this idea that Russia is about to invade NATO, and we've said that is one, it hasn't shown any ability to do so or willingness. But how may things like this actually change things? Because remember, Putin was saying about problems in Ukraine for the Russian-speaking population was the reason that he went in, one of the reasons in the first place. How can we see things happening there? And how does this undermine what the US already think of then the postmodernist Europeans? Now, this goes a step further, because today too, the time has come to punish Orban. No, it's not punishing Orban, it's punishing a whole country of group punishment of Hungary. Germany, I guess, have a history in then group punishment, and see how that then turned out. This is Germany's next government has said. And of course, this guy won the election. If he didn't win it, we would have seen the AfD, we would have seen the EU lean on some law somewhere to discredit the AfD. I'm positive that is exactly how that would have looked. That they're looking at withholding funds and suspending voting rights from Hungary. Again, how fucking convenient. Further, we go into Romania. We, of course, see Călin Georgescu was barred from running because he was conservative. And they claim that there was a few $100,000 from some shady dealings on TikTok. But as JD Vance said, if a few $100,000 can undermine your democracy, well, it wasn't very powerful to begin with. And what I see Europe is doing is they are trying to fight authoritarianism with authoritarianism. This is a paradox where those who oppose oppressive rule, they end up using similar methods of control and censorship. This leads to a cycle where the justification for restricting freedoms is framed necessary to prevent greater oppression. And this includes restricting free speech, banning opposition, imposing strict measures that limit rights under the guise of maintaining order, all of which we are seeing. It raised the question, can true freedom be defended by limiting it? No, it can't be. And this is what we've referred to, and I've shown you these multiple times, of total democracy. It means that you're free to feel and choose how you think and act. But if your actions and feelings don't align with the state's values, or in this case, the EU's values, you become an enemy of the state. So Viktor Orban, a democratically elected leader, he and his voters, they are free to think, feel and act how they see. But if it doesn't align with these values, then you are the enemy. For example, you can have your opinions on the Ukrainian war, on migration or gender, but if it doesn't match the state or coalition views, then you are considered an enemy. That is total democracy. And all of this leads into the rise of woke imperialism in Europe, something I put together a while back and I've shown you multiple times. While traditional imperialism was defined by territorial conquest and economic domination, we see a separate then view of imperialism coming. Today's version is cultural and ideological under the banner of progressive values. Sometimes you'll hear me refer to this as hard imperialism, conquest, soft imperialism, that you just will restrict voting or restrict money or restrict whatever until you get the way that you want. And this is evident in the EU. Member states that resist progressive social policies often face diplomatic, economic, or even legal repercussions. Countries like Hungary, Poland, Romania, which have rejected aspects of this ideological agenda, are frequently accused of being authoritarian or undemocratic, despite their governments being democratically elected. The hypocrisy of woke imperialism is striking. While these Western nations claim to oppose the imperialist practices of the past, they now engage in a softer, more insidious form of control. Instead of military force, they leverage institutions, trade agreements, and media influence to reshape societies according to their own ideological preferences. And not only will they lean on these, they will then outright ban democratic or potentially democratically elected leaders to fit in this also. So the democracy of the people to be able to change this has been taken away also. And this then goes into how I believe the outcomes are going to be and how this can affect Ukraine massively. So I see three possible outcomes for the EU. Now, one, it's most likely a continued trajectory into postmodernism, where knowledge, laws, politics, and what is the truth is all relative to experience and subjective. It's no longer objective, scientific, democratic. It's subjective to how you feel. Now, number two, we could see an overcorrection where we see very quickly Europe swing as far right as they are left, or even further, we see an overcorrection there. Now, I don't know if we'll see that. I think it's maybe too far down the line with the EU leaders and the laws and the bannings of areas for that to swing, but I guess we will see. It's not like we haven't seen this before. Number three, and this can happen in the event of either above, that the EU, it breaks up. In my opinion, other than Germany, Italy, France, and Spain, the other countries are not large enough to stand on their own feet if they want to retain the lifestyle, the power, and the international trade that they enjoy. So they will look for a different coalition. Now, this is why I say, no matter what you say about Putin's decrees that have been put out relating to traditionalism, these are a big deal. Now, right now, the enemy of the EU is Russia. They are actively at a war. That doesn't mean in 10 years' time it's not going to be seen very differently. And when countries and states and people are looking to where their ideologies sit, and you have this far-left postmodernist that has occurred in the West, that the East look and go, we can't see eye to eye with any of this, but we need to be part of a coalition, that they don't get absorbed into something there either or make their own. I think that is a big deal that is massively underestimated at this point in time. Russia's threat, Soviet threat, was always ideological, not as much military. And I think that ideological threat is still very, very much there. Now let's talk about how this relates to Ukraine. Ukraine's defense has been about independence and sovereignty from Russia, and how Russia want to put their own way onto these areas or into then Kyiv. But if I was a Ukrainian MP, I would be very concerned about joining the EU given its current state and given then what Ukraine hold dear, especially as these decisions are being made by unelected European Union officials. Ukraine might be heralded on Twitter and in the EU and in Brussels as the pinnacle of progressivism, but I can assure you it is not. Ukraine is a highly religious, nationalistic, proud and conservative state. There's nothing wrong with this, but these are things that are completely demonised by the EU. If you do not believe me, go to Ukraine. Go to Ukraine. People will try and sell you this idea of French-style pride flag waving, this and that, dudes are chicks, blah, blah, blah. It's not that at all. It's a very conservative state. This is why I would be concerned is then what does, because we're in a weakened state due to being out of a war and post-war attrition, what then does the EU lean on us, and what amount of sovereignty and independence do we then lose? Maybe the minerals deal that ties the US to Ukraine that may exclude the EU isn't as catastrophic as portrayed, because the US and Ukraine, regardless of their friction, I believe two conservative states are actually a lot closer in their ideology than Ukraine is with Western Europe. But I think with all of this, I think Ukraine will choose just geographically. If they have to choose between, we'll go EU. But I think there's a real chance in 5 years that soldiers may look back and ask, what the fuck did I fight for? The US controls a vast amount of our resources. The European Union, they control our policies, and one of these main ones is going to have to be mass immigration due to fighting a very bloody war. Therefore, our independence and sovereignty are destroyed. Isn't this exactly what we were fighting against? And the longer this goes on, the worse this is going to get as well. So I have a real fear of what is going to occur there. Now, speaking of the EU, and this is a real-world example that portrays to myself. I'm a very small YouTuber, and even I had the thought that I have friends in Europe, there are locations in Europe that I'd like to visit. Should I talk about this? Because I really think that they could ban my entry or deny me a visa. And with the rights and freedoms that the West was built on, this should never cross a reporter's mind when it is fair criticism that I pose no actual threat. I guess you could say I pose a huge threat ideologically, because I'm saying I just don't agree and I don't think they're on the same trajectory. But of course, it's no actual physical then threat. And even I have thought this, like, oh shit, should I talk about this? Because I could see that these states would just deny a visa to someone like myself, just calling this, a spade a spade. And these are the same reasons why I can likely never enter Russia, why I could probably not enter China, and now I have these same feelings towards Europe. This is exactly what people are fighting against, and what people fought for previously is that slip into fighting authoritarians with authoritarians. So strap in, I don't have a positive outlook at all. Now, speaking of then Zelensky and Trump, this is what Trump has said. Remember, at the end of the video yesterday, or at some point during the video, I said, look, this was just quickly because I had to run. I just saw this, was what Trump said about Zelensky joining NATO, as well as about the minerals deal. So we'll just watch this through.
And I think Zelensky, by the way, I see he's trying to back out of the rare earth deal. And if he does that, he's got some problems, big problems. We made a deal on rare earth, and now he's saying, well, you know, I want to renegotiate the deal. He wants to be a member of NATO. Well, he was never going to be a member of NATO. He understands that. So if he's looking to renegotiate the deal, he's got big problems. Go ahead.
So that he's got big problems he wants to negotiate, and that he knows, and Trump knows, that he will never be a member of NATO. Now, further on the US, this is what we spoke about yesterday. What if these countries just choose not to play ball? What we see is China, Japan, South Korea, they are jointly going to respond to US tariffs. And this comes through Russian state media for their first economic dialogue in 5 years that they're bracing against then US President Donald Trump's tariffs. And this is what we spoke about yesterday with secondary sanctions and tariffs. And I know these are different, but again, we can see that countries in here, they just may not choose to play ball. China is incredibly strategic, and their specialty is strategic defense. We have a massive video coming on exactly this, but this relates into what we spoke about yesterday. Is what if China and India just don't play ball? They just don't roll over. What then occurs there could have a huge effect on the US. Now, we have seen from many videos and the increase in strikes that we are seeing, an increase in the effectiveness of Russian Garand drones. It's been very obvious. We have reported on it. Now, this Russian page here shows these images, and they say the Russian armed forces have installed these Chinese antennas on the Garand to increase its resistance to Ukrainian electronic warfare. The new antenna filters interference and ensures a stable reception of GPS, allowing drones to maintain their route and reach the targets. Similar technologies have been used by both sides, but the integration on the Garand indicates a mass transition to a means of protection against navigation suppression. This complicates airspace control and increases the cost of localizing threats. So again, I'm not saying it is this, but it seemed likely it may be this because we have seen a definite increase in strikes against Ukrainian facilities with Garand drones, and an increase even in those drones being then launched into Ukraine. So let's go onto the maps. And first, before we actually zoom in on the maps, we need to talk about this. And I bring this up every month. Now, currently, we only have the deep state figures. And as you can see, the deep state figures are then a lot less sometimes than war mappers and AMK. So we'll wait for those and I'll present that too. But we see over the month of March that Russia occupied a further 130 square kilometres. Now, it is going to be 2, 3, 4 times this amount. Why is that? Because this only shows occupied territory. It does not include Russia's actions to take back a large amount of Kursk. So this is only within Ukraine's borders, not occupied territory. Now, there's a few ways you can present this. Remember, how you present data is just as important, if not more, than the data itself. So one way of thinking can be, well, they've actually slowed down from the month prior. Another way of thinking could be, well, if we look back into March 24, we saw a massive decrease from the month prior, but still a massive increase to this month across, being the similar conditions, say. So again, we'll just keep up to date. We'll see, because this shows us momentum. This shows us similar conditions. We'll keep up with it and we will see. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see April be a very, very large month of gains. So let's have a look at the map. So the first place I want to come, actually, let's explain the map. So here's Ukraine center, the capital of Kyiv, red areas, occupied since 22, the purple since 2014. So let's zoom in on Kudakov, and then we come to Rozliv, where we see this transportation device bringing 5 sets of Russian troops into separate areas. Now, we know that this is just, I hate the word cope, but this is a cope. We know it likely does not look like this. It more likely looks exactly like this, that Russia has moved the border out and that they now occupy this area. Now, the reason why this is the way it looks is this. So this is from Creamy Caprice, one of the best geolocators out there. We see that there are 3 Russian flags have gone up along Rozliv. Now, this doesn't mean that these are the only areas occupied. If you have 3 points being then occupied and flags up, very, very most likely this whole area has come under control. And this is from then this video right here. So what we see is this is the first Russian flag with this Russian soldier saluting. We see then a second Russian flag, and then we see the third located at those areas, and then this one here. So realistically, let's be honest, this is then occupied by the Russian forces, and likely that border has then moved up to this area. This is just trying not to show this because of this front line falling at the moment. Again, use Occam's razor. What is most likely? Is it most likely that 5 guys went out with flags and raised them here, or that the whole front line moved up into that direction? So let's just move just to the south of here. And of course, we have an area you'll be familiar with of Vuhledar. Now, people forget how recent Vuhledar was and how far the border then fell. And we see to the border is about 27 kilometres. But this is the footage I'm interested in on Vuhledar right here, geolocated right here, is the TOS-1 being destroyed. Now, one thing, and the reason we show this is I've said there's been a large increase in Russian use of thermobaric multiple launch rockets on the front line, and that we hadn't seen any destroyed, but we will probably see that due to the increased use of them. And this is the first one I've seen destroyed for a long time. Now, I will say this vehicle appears to have been on the side, driven off the side of the road and gone into a crater or a ditch and possibly abandoned, as you can see here, potentially maybe track off there, but it's definitely not, in my opinion, in a firing position. But this is definitely a TOS, and we see this struck by something and then exploding. But to my opinion, we can see this then hit. It wasn't armed at the time. I think it may have fired off its rockets, or they've been taken if the vehicle was abandoned, due to it doesn't have that spectacular fireworks we would expect to see or would see from a TOS thermobaric being hit. The explosion would be significantly larger than that. But it's still important because we see if this is recent, the footage came out today, that doesn't mean it is today, but if it is recent, then a drone and system operating 27 or more kilometres behind the front line, striking that, and it goes in line with the increase, this paint by numbers of Russian offensive tactics of using thermobarics and that strike back there. Now, we're just going to come just to the north of here, and we have then what I call then Eastern Pokrovsk, the Suka-Balka area. Now, we saw, if I turn this on yesterday, we saw this red check pop up, and this is confirmed by then Syriac maps right in here. There's no deep state map update for today. Legends, I feel absolutely shocking. I wish I didn't have to do this again. Hopefully this time works. Otherwise, I'm not doing it. Have a great day, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.